all we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over that. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
We'll bow our heads. Well, Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for giving us the wisdom and grace, Lord. There's so much that we have to do in this state, but we again go back to the wisdom and grace that you bestow upon us. Lord, help us as leaders as we carry forth with all the tasks that you have set before us. Lord, we just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity, Lord, to come and just fellowship here in this wonderful capital, Lord. We do all of this in Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Now for our national anthem, our Black national anthem, Sabria Hendricks.
faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the
Now we will have the introduction of Chief Justice George Draper from Representative Barbara Ann Washington, Kansas City.
As an African American attorney, growing up, we didn't see a lot of people that looked like us. We really didn't see anybody that looked like us that could be in the building across the street where we take our oath to become lawyers. So it is with my honor today that with my humbleness, I introduce one of my divine nine fraternity people. I am Pinky Ring today because it is my sorority's 112th anniversary. And I'm happy to know that Judge Draper, who has made history by being only the second African American to be the Chief Justice of the Missouri Supreme Court. So he's always been about the law. Justice Draper has had law in his veins since he was a little boy, growing up with his dad, another attorney. And it runs in his family. He married a lawyer who became a judge, and his daughter is now an attorney with the Circuit Attorney's Office in St. Louis. But his similarities to the man that we honor today, Martin Luther King, don't stop there. See, like Martin Luther King, Judge Draper is a Morehouse man. And he is also in a Greek organization. And he, like Martin Luther King, knows that it is our justice is to go out and fight for what's best. He does that as a judge by being part of the Racial Fairness Committee, by being on the Sentencing Committee that works for fair sentencing and works for better solutions for those who suffer from drug treatment. And he's been giving back to his community since as long as he can remember. He's a St. Louis native, but he left us for a long time. But knowing that Missouri is where we showed him, he needed to show us that he wanted to come back. And so he resides in St. Louis. He came back after law school, and I ask you to put your hands together right now and welcome Justice George W. Draper.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. On behalf of my colleagues at the Supreme Court, not just myself, I bring you greetings. We are in solidarity with you in celebrating the life of one of our greatest leaders in this country, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I was with you last year. I've been with you before. I'm not the keynote speaker, so I don't intend to stand up here long and preach at you and talk to you about the merits of Dr. King. We've all read bios about him. The good thing about this national federal holiday and celebrations that we continue to remember him each year. And each year I pull out some book about him that I've read, something I'm looking at. This year I pulled out a book by a fellow by the name of James Garrett, a book on King called Bearing the Cross. And in that book, part of it, in the epilogue, it talks about kind of what I talked about last year. Many people choose to talk about Dr. King. He was a hero, but he was a man. He wasn't a saint. He was a human being. And all that is true. Even in the epilogue, his sister and one of his good friends from Morehouse College discusses the fact that Martin was not a saint. Martin was a man. But let me tell you what I believe about Martin King from reading the various works on him. He may not have been a saint, but he was a hero. He was divinely inspired. He was a man prepared for history when it came to his door. When he went to Birmingham, we all know he intended to be a middle-class preacher. But his friend made him attend the meeting, and he was elected chairman at that point in time and led the bus boycott. History and his preparedness made him a leader in the formation of SCLC subsequent to that. But his divine inspiration is evidenced by the speech he gave in 1963 in Washington, D.C. You remember the speech? We all know now it wasn't "I Have a Dream." It was a check speech that he wrote in New York and then shortly coming down to D.C. A very short period of time he wrote that speech in. And while he was giving that speech, while he was giving the check speech, which was relevant, important, the content was material to the march. A voice on the side from Mahalia Jackson said, "What? You know what she said? Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream." And Martin proceeded to give his "I Have a Dream" speech. That speech won Martin Luther King the Pulitzer Prize along with his action. Martin Luther King was a man prepared for the time, and I would say divinely inspired. So my question to you is, what time is it? Are you prepared for the time? I hope that you will be divinely inspired, because the one thing we need to do at this point in time in our history, honor Dr. King. The only thing I will ask you to do, and as a judge I have to be careful about what I ask people to do and what I advocate. But I will ask you this year, no matter what your party, no matter what your political stripe, you owe it to our ancestors, the people who founded this country, to Martin Luther King and the marches on Washington, and the things they sacrificed in their lives, to vote. If you do nothing else this year, vote. As I said, Republican, Democrat, Independent, vote. And I hope that you too will be divinely inspired. Thank you so much.
We could, a little time to give up for the second Black Chief Justice in the history of the state of Missouri.
Everybody, it is such a blessing to be here with my colleagues, with our Chief Justice, with our Governor, our wonderful First Lady. If any of you weren't at the State of the State, she got a really special mention by the Governor during that speech. I was tearing up. I don't know about everybody else, but hearing about their story. Governor Parson and I overlapped. I've been here long enough. I was sworn in 2015. He was a senator at the time, and I didn't work with him on any legislation during the 2 years we overlapped in the legislature, but I got to know him a little bit when he was lieutenant governor, and I've certainly gotten to work really close with him in the couple years, year and a half now that he's been the governor. And I just have to say the thing that's impressed me the most, we saw that in the speech today, is that he is a real servant leader. He's somebody who aspires to and does the hard work of representing every corner of our state, regardless of what your party label is, regardless of what your skin color is, regardless of what part of the state you live in, regardless of how rich or poor or how educated or uneducated you might be. He realizes that his call is to serve all Missourians. And that is something we don't see necessarily from everyone in a position like that. So I've really appreciated that about himself. The other thing that's really struck me is just his humility. For somebody who's been through the offices and public office that he's been through. He's been a county sheriff, he's been a state senator, he's been a lieutenant governor, he's been the governor of the state, only 50 of them throughout the country, right? He is still the same person that he was when he walked through probably that sheriff's door, several years ago and started that job. And that's something that most of us, our parents tell us, when we're little, never forget where you came from. And that's something that I've held close to me, because I'm just a little boy from Northwoods, Missouri, from North County. And no matter where I've been blessed to go in life, whether that was to Yale University, whether that was in the halls of Congress when I had the pleasure of serving for Senator Talent on Capitol Hill, whether that's serving here or serving back in local office before I was elected here, I've always tried to humble myself and just remember where I came from. And Governor Parson is certainly a great example of that, and somebody who I've really tried to model myself after in observing his leadership. And so before I formally introduce him, I will just say one thing, since I have this platform right now. Myself and one of my other colleagues wrote an op-ed in December urging the governor to grant clemency to some of the 3,500 people who are pending before the governor's office right now. And something that really struck me was in the governor's speech when he talked about fighting for the unborn and talking about fighting for the least among us. And that is something that I know is near and dear to his heart as well as to the First Lady's heart. But sometimes it gets overlooked that some of the most powerless people in our society are the people who are incarcerated because they don't have that much of a voice. We often forget about them. We put these labels on them: felons, criminals, rapists, drug dealers, all these kinds of things. But we forget that they have families just like us. And some of them have been over-incarcerated. There's people who are serving in prison right now where we've changed the law. People were sentenced for 20 years. We changed the law for those crimes so that it's 15 years now, but we didn't make it retroactive so those folks are eligible. And so those are some of the kinds of cases that are pending right now. And I just want to urge the governor to take a look at some of those cases. There's also some really compelling individual cases like Patty Pruitt, like Bobby Bostic, who was given a 241-year sentence, 241 years given as a juvenile when he was sentenced, and the Supreme Court has now ruled that that kind of sentence is unconstitutional, but we can't change anything about that in the legislature. That power resides with the governor. So I just want to encourage him to do the right thing in those cases. And with that being said, I would like to introduce my friend, our 57th governor, Mike Parson.
Please be seated, everyone. What a day it's been, and what a day to remember Martin Luther King for who he was. And Chief Justice, what great remarks. What a pure message that everybody can understand. It's about voting. If you want a voice, have a voice. And we got to encourage everybody to do that. And I couldn't agree with you 100% more. Forget your power parties for a minute. Just realize everybody should have a voice. Great message you have on that. Upstairs earlier before I come down here, me and the First Lady. And let me tell you something about the First Lady of the state of Missouri that you haven't had a chance to meet her. I'm telling you, she's been with me through thick and thin for 35 years. And I'm telling you, there's not a better public servant in the state of Missouri than the First Lady trying to do her role as First Lady of the state of Missouri. Would you please welcome the First Lady of the state of Missouri? And Wiley and Ashley, thank you very much for being part of this today to make sure we're here representing Martin Luther King's birthday on this very special day and for what he stood for on that. When the Chief Justice was up here talking, there's one thing I want to say about true leaders. And Martin Luther King would be one of those people, for sure. It's never about being the best. It never is. It's always about making people around you better. And I can't think of any other way to describe his past and what he done for other people, the sacrifices he made and was willing to make those sacrifices. A man of faith, wasn't afraid to talk about his faith, wasn't afraid to talk about injustice, wasn't scared of things that could happen to him, which I'm sure as a leader he had to wonder sometimes, him and his family. You know that. But you can imagine being a true leader like he was, to face the obstacles that he faced. Today there was a lady that I recognized in the chamber today. I had a chance to meet her from St. Louis area, not far from Martin Luther King Boulevard. She was 85 years old, but she came to Missouri in 1955. She comes from Mississippi. And to sit down and listen to her and really understand what it was like to be there just for her telling me was a whole different experience for me. And I've heard lots of stories, I've read lots of articles, but to really sit down with her and hear her story and talk about her faith and her leadership and her community to try to make things better was one of the most remarkable experiences I've ever had as a leader. And there was no doubt I was humbled when I left her house to realize those are the kind of people that are really trying to make a difference. And not only are they trying, they are making a difference. She's lived in the same neighborhood for 50 years since she came to Missouri. She had the opportunity to leave, she could have left. But she truly did stay and fight the fight. She helping kids, helping people in the communities. You can't help but Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, how many people he inspired like Mrs. Jones? And I don't know if he did or he didn't, but I bet he did. And how much that's led to the future generations to try to make life better. And regardless of what the color of your skin is, it should be about, are we trying to make the next generations better than our generation? All of us should have that calling to ourselves to say, what are we doing? Not just talking about it, not me as governor making political speeches, but what are we really doing to try to make sure we make difference in people's lives? That's what true public service is about. That's why the representatives and senators are here today, because they got that kind of heart. And it doesn't come from everybody. And I just appreciate that. I appreciate you allowing me to be here today to be part of this celebration. I knew we were going to do it one day a year, so we say. But I want to just say, Dr. Martin Luther King and Mrs. Jones, for me, it won't be just a daily celebration or once a year. I want to keep those people in mind, the sacrifices they make, and I want to use them for role models to be a better leader myself, on that. Now, I also told everybody upstairs, when I got done speaking, I was going to exit stage right on y'all tonight. It's been a long day, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to get out of here. And I'm going to tell you something. Sabria, is that right? Sabria? If anybody in this program can beat your singing with their speeches, I'm going to stay and see if they can do that tonight. But I'm telling you, that was a wonderful message.
Greetings from the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus by one of our, he's a freshman, we came in at the same time. He's a highly intelligent young man, and I'm so honored to share this post with him. Representative Kevin Wyndham Jr. from the St. Louis County.
Hello and good evening. My name is Kevin Wyndham Jr., and I have the honor of serving as the state representative for Missouri's 85th House District. Also, I serve as the vice chair of the Democratic Caucus in the House. So as a member of Missouri's Legislative Black Caucus, allow me to welcome you to our state's beautiful capital. The first two state capitals in Jefferson City were destroyed by fire, and we are currently in the third iteration of Missouri State Capitol in Jefferson City, which was completed in 1917. And the exterior of our Capitol, as well as the floors of the corridors, are made of limestone marble from Greene County, Missouri. So the limestone of Greene County is known for being resilient and requiring minimal care. And when I think about the qualities of the limestone from Greene County, Missouri, I think about the black population in Missouri. As a caucus, we are resilient in our policies and practices while requiring minimal praise and attention. Similarly to the limestone granite exterior of our Capitol, since its founding 50 years ago, Missouri's Legislative Black Caucus' primary purpose has been to get the job done. But oftentimes we often look good doing it as well. A quote frequently attributed to Dr. King is that the arc of the moral universe is long but bends towards justice. Missouri's black population has made continual political gains throughout the moral arc of this state, with the first black legislator being elected in 1920 the Black Legislative Caucus being formed in 1970. And this past year, at the 100th General Assembly, the Black Caucus had both its largest Black Caucus and the most members of House Democratic leadership in history. Whether there's one member of the Black Caucus in the legislature or 24 Missourians, should be assured that Missouri's Legislative Black Caucus was founded to enhance the quality of life for all Missourians, especially our communities that have been disenfranchised and divested from. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate the life of the truly awesome leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I hope that you enjoy the evening that we planned for you.
As previously stated before Kevin got up here, highly intelligent. Appreciate the perspective, my man. Now we're going to have a prayer from Pastor Adrian Hendricks from the Joshua House Church in Jefferson City, Missouri.
And we face the dawn of day. But the day is not quite dawning. Millions of my people stand, pleading at the bars of justice for reparation and land. We're not free in this country, and the truth is the light. So I turn to ask my watchman, what's the hour of the night? This first stanza of a poem etched by the pen of Queen Mother Attlee Moore on July 27 of 1950 poses a question that continues to echo down the corridors of time. What is the hour of the night? How long shall we endure? When will the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a dream of equity, a dream of inclusion, a dream of brotherhood and sisterhood, be woven into the fabric of the American experience? For 52 years, the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus has gathered together to bring exposure to the great dream and the great cause. We gather to offer exposure to the power of our collective imagination that drives us toward a more democratic world, a world of love, compassion, and justice. We gather to magnify the vision of Dr. King for a world that lives and breathes resistance. Resistance to economic injustice, resistance to racial agitation, resistance to social economic change, imperialism, and war. As we occupy this sacred space of our state capitol, we gather to remind each other of the hope that we share in the building of a better society, a hope that is found in the power of you and I. To continue the movement with our marching, to continue the movement with our believing, to continue the movement with our dreaming, our ideas and our ideologies, our strategies and our scheming. We gather to remind ourselves that the work is hard, but must be done. Sometimes lonely, but must be done. Sometimes and often daunting, but must be done. So that the fire of freedom will live on, and the light of hope will shine on. Time is running out for us. A deadline we must meet to file reparation petitions and make politicians earn their seats. If we're to win this battle, every organization must join the fight. Then we'll tell our watchmen what's the hour of the night. God bless you.
We really appreciate you being here. At this time, I'd like to introduce our elected officials that are here. I'm going to begin with, of course, the governor of Missouri, Governor Mike Parson, and I would be remiss if I did not introduce the First Lady. Please support. I'd like to introduce my mayor, Mayor Quentin Lucas, the 55th mayor of Kansas City, Missouri. I was scanning through the audience. Is Mary White is she still with us this evening? She's still here? I know she was here, so I do want to acknowledge Mary Cruson as well. There was a lot of applause and a lot of handshakes for our former colleague and current city councilman from the 3rd District, Brandon Ellington. Councilman Ellington. Now, I know this could take a long time because we have numerous members of the General Assembly that are scattered throughout the audience, so I'm going to keep this simple. Would all senators and representatives please stand? If I did not acknowledge these individuals who put their lives on the line for us every day, would members of the Missouri State Highway Patrol and other law enforcement agencies or state capitol police officers, would you also be acknowledged? And finally, this person is not an elected official, but is very important to this evening. Cheryl Dozier is the executive director of Missouri Legislative Black Caucus, and we actually started planning this program back in June. There's a lot that goes into putting this program together. Ms. Dozier has done this for numerous years, and without her input and her help, we could not make this evening possible. Cheryl Dozier, where are you? I just want to thank you for all that you do, not just for this evening, but in general for the Legislative Black Caucus. We're so fortunate to have you as our executive director. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and please enjoy the evening.
We move on to the next part of the evening where we go to our reflections. And I have the awesome pleasure to introduce one of my favorite people in the entire legislature. Definitely one of the most positive and lovely people you may ever meet. And definitely has the best snort in the business. Lakeisha Biden. Lakeisha Biden.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? I need interaction. Good evening, everyone. How are you? Yeah, there we go. Let me get a little energy here. All right. So as we do the reflections on the dynamic life and force of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we have to remember that he was a fighter. The resiliency of the people he fought for and continue to fight for today, we must remember the determination of those he wanted to have a seat at the table that we call justice. In fighting for the suffrage of Black people and demanding the liberation of Black people across this country, in all of the fighting, he never lifted a violent hand, but always a tone of urgency. He once said that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light, and hate cannot drive out hate, only love. We must give respect and honor to the thousands of people and lives lost in the effort to obtain the everyday rights of African American people in this country. On today, the day of the man who was unafraid, unwavering, and stood firm in his beliefs and the beliefs of the people we fight for, we must remember that today is a day of greatness, of the life force that came here to give us hope. And we must not lose that hope as we move forward. And on this day, we say thank you, Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you.
And I bring you greetings from Rod Chapel. One little quote that'll take less than a minute. one of Dr. King's quotes, "History will have to record that the greatest tragedy of the period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people." And so I am happy that the Black Caucus is not silent, that you all are making noise on behalf of the most vulnerable people in Missouri. And so President Chappell just wants you to know to keep on fighting. The NAACP thing is, when we fight, we win. So let's keep fighting in the spirit of Dr. King. God bless you.
Next, we will have a tribute by Pastor Tommy. Representative Tommy Pearson Jr., Assistant Minority Floor Leader out of Kansas City, Missouri, St. Louis. I'm trying to come in on my side. He's trying to steal him. He's totally cool. He's on my side. Representative Tommy Pearson Jr.
Tommy Pearson, you turn over, y'all.
Well, good evening. I don't know about you all, but I am ready to hear from the keynote speaker. I said amen because that's just where my mind is. Because we are talking about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And so to the governor, to our keynote, to my colleagues, to each of you, first of all, I am thankful that you are here. I am glad that you are here. I am already blessed by what my eyes have seen and what my ears have heard. I was just thinking about if I were to try to dance in the way that these young folks did, you would be wheeling me out of here. So I'm just thankful that I am doing what God has called me to do. And so that is what I encourage you to do. He is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which tells me that he is a man of faith. And it reminds me of my favorite Dr. King quote, which is that faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. And so that is my encouragement to you today. And then the pastor in me just has to go to Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 1, where faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So I encourage you that as you go about your day, as you go about your walk, that you exercise your faith, take the first step, and then allow God to do the rest. Thank you, God bless you, and I'm ready to hear from our keynote speaker. Thank you.
I am honored with people tonight to introduce our keynote speaker, Mayor Quentin Lucas, newly elected here in Kansas City. It is a pride and joy to all of us. He comes from very humble beginnings and has been the epitome of what it means to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And we really appreciate you and all of the work that you're doing in Kansas City, from the Tenants' Rights Bill to Zero Fare. He is making very progressive and major legislation happen in Kansas City, Missouri. So without further ado, let's not make this too much longer and bring up the Honorable Mayor Quentin Lucas of Kansas City.
Are we doing well? Good. Thank you for waiting for me. And, you know, they talked about coming from somewhat humble beginnings. Something I never would have expected in all of my dreams when I was a little boy in Kansas City, we were just getting by, was that one day the governor of Missouri would say, "You better make it a good speech." So man, that's some pressure that I didn't know was coming a few years back. I want to thank you all for thinking to invite me. I'm going to give you just a little bit of my own reflection from my about 36 hours in Jefferson City, which is that y'all do a lot. I see why Brandon's with us now at City Council, because it's kind of like vacation compared to what y'all do over here. But I want to commend you all for the exceptional work that you do each day. And I've already said this a few times, which is that even on our longest day, even when Brandon and all of them are giving me trouble, I get to go home. I get to go home, I get to rest, I get to come back and work the next day. You all don't always have that honor. You give hours, you give dedication, time away from your homes, your community, your family, your spouses, to work for the people of Missouri. And I thank you so much for that. So let's give our elected officials here a round of applause once again. So often I like to actually deliver speeches extemporaneously, but this was so august a crowd that I wanted to give you some prepared remarks for what I hope is a positive reflection, not just of Dr. King, but where our communities have been, and many of the challenges that come ahead for us. Much of what we recognize today relates to journeys. Our journeys, from lives sometimes with challenge, communities with great hope, and passion for making a difference. But I know, and we all know, we don't make it to our positions alone. There are people every step of the way who lift you, who challenge you, who believe in you. For me, that's people like Kiki Curls, Barbara Washington, Brandon Ellington, Governor Parson. People I've had the chance to meet and who said, brother, you got some good ideas. I may challenge you, I may push you, that's because I want you to be better. I want our community to be better. And I thank you all for that. I also want to make sure that I acknowledge the important work of the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus. You all for decades have worked to make sure that our voices are heard and are recognized in Jefferson City. The last time I actually spent 2 days in Jefferson City was for the Missouri bar exam. And so as you may know, I wasn't looking to rush to come back. It worked out all right. But it's still been a little while. But what I've known over all that time, I've been a Missourian for all that time, whether I was a student in St. Louis for college, or I was a young lawyer starting a career in Kansas City, or a brand new mayor who was trying to figure things out. Your group has looked out for me. Your group has looked out for my sisters, my nieces, my nephews, so many of us, our black communities throughout the state, looking for respect. I know your work is not easy. Jefferson City, respectfully, is not easy. I want you to know that we all notice what you do. We respect what you do. And your caucus makes a powerful difference for all of us. And then I want to recognize, I'm glad he stayed, because I actually wrote some words about it. My friend, Governor Parson. You know, I've met a lot of impressive people over the years. They glad him, a lot of them take photos, and often forget where they came from. They too often forget about the struggles we're all fighting each day. They forget about the cooperative hand that we need from Missouri State government. But that has not been my relationship with Mike Parson. We met only a few months ago while we were talking about Missouri's team, the Kansas City Chiefs. And I remember at that time, and by the way, you give the Chiefs a round of applause. I know some of y'all want to say, they're Kansas City and everybody. The Chiefs are the real reason that me and Brandon don't even have to go back to Kansas City. Ain't nobody worried about what we're doing. They're all thinking about Patrick Mahomes. But I remember from my first conversation with the governor, he heard me out. We have issues we agree on, we have some issues we disagree on. But he listened, and he said, what can the state do? What can we build? And he's always exhibited that he cares. In a world in which too many people go through the motions, Governor, your integrity, your heart, your passion, your relatability makes this state better every day, makes our cities better every day, and makes all of us better each day. Thank you, Governor Parson. So Governor, senators, representatives, friends, the world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble is in the land. confusion all around. But I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. shared those words in his famous Sermon on the Mount speech, which would be the last speech of his life. He goes on to say, I see God working in this period in a way that men in some strange way are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up. The cry is always the same. We want to be free. But as those of you who have fought and struggled for decades, those who fight and struggle now, all of us know well that freedom didn't just mean freedom from billy clubs and attack dogs of the apartheid South. It meant to Dr. Martin Luther King on his last night alive, it means to all of you, it means freedom from hurt and neglect by the policies, too often of a nation, of a state, of cities, that rarely take into account what our people, my people, have a life expectancy that in Kansas City is 20 years less in majority-minority zip codes than it is just a few miles to the west. We understand, my brothers and sisters, that freedom means economic dignity for the hard-working black woman in our country whose inflation-adjusted earnings have actually fallen in recent years. I say again, has fallen. As we talk about progress, we still have a country where a black woman of the exact same credentials, the same background, the same education, makes 61 cents to the dollar of her white male counterpart. Freedom means that our young brothers won't be suspended from schools at a disproportionate rate, convicted at a higher rate, and with longer sentences than many of our white counterparts. And freedom means that we all live life with the same rules, the same chances, the same forgiveness. Some of you who listen to my speeches, or if you live in Kansas City, you got 200 mailers from me when I was running, might have heard this story. But some years ago, I worked on a death penalty case. It was a case out of Georgia. The town was Griffin, Georgia, about an hour south of Atlanta, a town of about 22,000 people. And when you drove in, you felt like it was 1965. Separate churches, separate ends of town. In some ways it reminded me of Kansas City some days too. I met the death row inmate, Curtis Osborne. He had been sentenced to death at the age of 21, back in 1991. I met him 17 years later at the time of his final appeals. And you see, although much in the legal system had changed, much had not. Curtis's family could vote, they could work somewhat freely, but they didn't have money. So he got a public defender who represented 1,000 felony defendants that year. Again, 1,000 felony defendants that year. And to make extra money, this public defender could take capital cases. He took 4 capital cases in that year. The trial had a plethora of problems that any judge would find trouble. Scientific evidence unchallenged, plea offers not shared, subtle and not so subtle racism from the lawyer employed to save Curtis's life. But to me, the final injustice didn't come in 1991, when after a 4-day trial, a jury convicted him and sentenced him to death. It didn't come over the decades when courts of appeals rejected relief. The final indignity came when we were seeking clemency for Mr. Osborne. He, a convicted murderer, was slated to be executed roughly 2 weeks after another convicted murderer, Samuel Crowe. Like my client Curtis, Mr. Crowe had been fighting with a drug addiction at the time of the crime. Like my client Curtis, Mr. Crowe had been a man of great Christian faith during his time of incarceration. Like my client Curtis, Mr. Crowe had been a very well-behaved inmate. But unlike my client Curtis, Mr. Crowe was white. Relying on Mr. Crowe's good behavior and faith, his life was spared by the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles. Reading that news 2 weeks before Curtis's execution, I had hope for an instant. Curtis was a man of faith. Curtis was a peacemaker in prison. Curtis was a father. Maybe he too would get clemency. But I knew better. I was only 23 years old, and I knew better.
I knew that the humanity, the dignity that the clemency board saw in Mr. Crow would not be seen in Curtis, and it wasn't. He was put to death 2 weeks later. While dramatic in its scale, Curtis's story is one we see each day. It's the story we see in a black or brown employee whose career path is curtailed because they say she doesn't fit the culture. It's the story we see in a ne'er-do-well white teenager whose high school hijinks are cured by a slap on the wrist and a good lawyer, while the same black teenager becomes designated a career criminal offender. It's the story we see as banks tell us the numbers just don't work in development deals in East Kansas City or North St. Louis, even though millions of dollars of spending power leave our communities each day. It's the story we see when a black male student just walking with books in his arms back to campus at Washington University is stopped by the campus police and asked to show his ID, something I remember very well. And it's a story shown in our policies each day. It's why a few days ago I got a call in my office from the Wall Street Journal. And they called in some ways doubting how Kansas City could afford zero fare transit, free bus transit for the working class, while they have never called us in Kansas City to ask about how we can afford stadiums for our teams, performance spaces for our symphony, or roads to get our elite. And it's a story shown as our state and our country debate and litigate marijuana policy, but we don't give a darn about the thousands of our brothers and sisters walking around with misdemeanor marijuana records that continue to limit life opportunities for all of them. So, my friends, it's a story we can never stop fighting to change. It's why we're making the buses free in Kansas City. It's why we are going to pardon thousands of misdemeanor marijuana convictions in Kansas City. It's why we're saying in our city that we don't have to live in filth and with mold. And it's why we're saying that every life lost to homicide in Kansas City, in St. Louis, anywhere in Missouri isn't just a statistic. It's a tragedy. It's an epidemic. And it's something that no new shiny stadium, no new downtown building, no great policy can gloss over. And all of us in our communities need to recognize that. So as Dr. King might paraphrase, trouble is in the land, Missouri, confusion all around, but I know somehow that we can see the stars. You see that a black child, the youngest of three, born to a single mother in Kansas City, can become a mayor. You see that his sisters can all get through school, that all their children can be safe. You can see that our work changes and saves lives. And you can see that whether you're a minority or a majority, that you can lead the fight to make a brighter day for Missourians, to build the genuine equality, which includes economic dignity that Dr. King fought for. Lord knows we've had our challenges, and we will continue to have our challenges. But as Dr. King noted in the Sermon on the Mount speech, we must never forget the story of the Great Samaritan. A man on the road to Jericho had fallen. He'd been beaten and stripped by robbers, left half dead on the side of the road. Many others had passed, worried not about the man, but their own paths. They didn't want to get attacked. They didn't want to get beaten. But the Samaritan stopped and took care of him. Because rather than asking, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? The Samaritan asked, if I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Paraphrasing King, we must not ask, if I stop to help people have economic dignity, if I stop to reform criminal justice, if I stop to build a fair and just community, what will happen to me? What will happen to my career? What will happen to my next election? What will happen to my status? We must instead ask, if I do not stop to help our people, if I do not stop to help our poorest, whether they're in your city, whether they're 3 hours away, whether they're urban, rural, suburban, if I do not stop to help the masses who cry out for freedom, what will happen to them? God bless you for the fight you all take each day and for all that you do for Missouri.
Thank you all so very much.
Before I bring up our chair of the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus, I need to make a quick announcement. A little birdie told me to invite you all to the third floor rotunda afterwards. There is food. And now we'll have the chairman's closing remarks. Representative Steve Roberts II, St. Louis City.
Good evening, everyone. I'll keep my remarks brief because I hear that I'm the last person before food, so I know everyone's, I'm sure, hungry and excited about that. But again, thank you to Mayor Lucas and the leadership and all of our speakers here tonight. Those are some tough acts to follow. Next time I'm going to make sure I'm at the front of the program as opposed to the end. But I just wanted to take a few moments to talk about music as we stand here today to pay tribute to Dr. King's legacy and honor his memory. We think back to the past and remember the brave men and women who fought for equality, justice, and change. We often picture the civil rights marches, a highly inclusive, nonviolent movement that elevated the conscience of man. As they marched and protested, the voices of thousands of men and women rang out, not with words of anger, but with songs. You see, music was a key piece of the civil rights movement because melodies and words provided emotion, and more importantly, hope. Hope for peace, hope for change, and hope for a better tomorrow. And for the Reverend King, music was just as important to his message as a means of spreading the idea. Music and lyrics have a profound impact on each person, as did the words of Dr. King. Throughout his life, he witnessed the power of music, from his mother singing and directing the church choir, to his relationship with his wife, Coretta Scott, who was enrolled at the New England Conservatory of Music as he studied at the Divinity School in Boston. Dr. King always recognized the power of music as an instrument of change. Dr. King explained that much of the power of the freedom movement in the United States came from music. It has strengthened us with its sweet rhythms and encourage us when we, sorry. Everybody has the blues. Everyone longs for meaning. Everyone needs to love and be loved. Everybody needs to clap hands and be happy. Everybody longs for faith. In music especially, this broad category called jazz, there is a stepping stone towards all of these. Today, when politicians seek office, they walk out to music, words and melodies that reach us on another level. Through their work, politicians can strengthen the will of the people, and they can influence us to feel and act. But there's a common element between the musicians and politicians, the way they think and the way they feel. Musicians think from their hearts, picturing big, revolutionary, and visionary ideas, as do policymakers, contrary to popular belief. Communication is essential in solving the issues our state is facing. Criminal justice reform challenges us to dare to forgive, and Dr. King taught forgiveness not as an occasional act, but as a constant attitude. We must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. We must allow ex-offenders the opportunity to become productive members of society. Dr. King encouraged us never to be afraid of what's right, especially if the well-being of a person is at stake. Remember that music is an essential ingredient to empowering the hearts of people, and when you hear those tunes, clap your hands, sing along, dance and sway, and be happy. The good Reverend would have wanted it that way. Thank you, and God bless. In the spirit of Carol and Sidney Machine, if they're still here, if they can come up.
appears they've stepped out, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank them for their hard work and service. They'll be leaving us this year, but we really appreciate all the great accomplishments that they've done in the Senate. Thank you all.
And for this part portion of the evening, we're going to bring up Representative Steve Lynch, who's our majority whip, and we tried to join the Black Caucus earlier today, kind of kept. We almost let him in, but he's missing a key prerequisite. Sorry, Steve, I talked to the guys. No go. But you get to do the good next year, so it's the best I can do. So, without further ado, Steve Lynch.
Good evening, everybody. I believe that God is still on the throne. Repeat it with me. God is still on the throne. I believe that God has still got a plan. Say it with me. God has still got a plan. I believe that His plan includes me. Say it again. I want you to get it. God's plan includes me. Let's pray. Father, as we gather before you, we give you glory and praise for just who you are. And Father, we praise you to know that you're still in the business of changing lives, changing states, changing countries, and changing this world. And Father, we are so inspired tonight by the life of Dr. King, a man that you love, a man that loved you. And it is so inspiring to see what one man can make such a difference in this world. Father, you made him with a voice, and he chose to proclaim righteousness and truth. You made him with legs and feet that he might go into the battle wherever you sent him. And you made him, Father, with arms and hands that he might gather together people to go with him. Father, that's all of us. It is you that does the work within us. Father, let Dr. King be an inspiration to all of us, that we are all in your plan, that we can all make a difference, that we can all do good, and that we can all change this world for better for all of us. All of God's people said. Amen.
Now you guys understand our consideration, right? All right. So we have something special tonight.
I need Representative Steve Roberts to please come to the stage. Just remember second. This is for the senator. Unfortunately, she's not with us tonight, but we will make sure that she receives this. Is Senator Nasheed with us? Senator Nasheed still with us? If she is, will you please come forward? Or a representative for her? And former Representative Brandon Ellington, will you please come forward? So we believe in giving credit where credit is due. In appreciation to Councilman Brandon Ellington, Kansas City, Missouri, for outstanding and exemplary leadership. The Missouri Legislative Black Caucus Chairman, 2015 to 2016. We give you this in honor, sir.
In appreciation to Senator Jamila Nasheed and her many years of service with the Missouri
Black Caucus, we'd like to represent her. We'd like to show our appreciation for her and her team. You and James no longer with us. You guys have been the example on that side. So just want to thank you.
As Vice Chair of the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus, I'm very excited to introduce or to give this award, show of appreciation, in appreciation to Representative Stephen Roberts II, St. Louis, Missouri, for outstanding and exemplary leadership, Missouri Legislative Black Caucus Chairman 2019-2020. I only hope that I can follow in his footsteps. Thank you, good sir. And since I'm from Kansas City, I will read in appreciation to Senator Shalon Kiki Cross in honor of your years of service, Missouri Legislative Black Caucus 2020. All right, y'all ready to go eat? Then Jeff got karaoke after this. All right. If everyone could please stand for the retirement of the colors by Lincoln University, ROTC.
I used to be so broken, lost, empty. A heart with no beat, a singer with no song to sing. So I know the feeling, the silence is deafening. But in your pain lies a blessing, a sweet and sour victory. So keep walking, 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 though it seems so far. No matter who you are, see there's one thing that I know. Life, it can leave you so bitter, 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 bitter. But you must believe that it gets better, 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 better. It's alright, dry your eyes, send a prayer to the sky. I know it's hard to find, but you must believe that it gets better. Listen to me. I know you're scared, your heart's bleeding. But what are you gonna do now? I think it's time you break free and keep walking, 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 though it seems so far. No, it doesn't really matter who you are. See, there's one thing that I know. can leave you so bitter, 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 bitter. But you must believe that it gets better, better.